What happens when a captive woman is forced to tend to the wounded son of the very man responsible for her capture? In a world where every choice could mean life or death, one act of compassion changes everything. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Arizona sun beat down on the dusty terrain as Sarah Matthews clutched her weathered journal, the only possession she'd managed to keep since her capture 3 weeks ago. The Apache raid on the stagecoach had been swift and merciless. 7 passengers dead and she, spared for reasons she couldn't comprehend. Water, she whispered to herself, her cracked lips barely able to form the word. The Apache camp bustled with activity around her. Women grinding corn, children playing, warriors maintaining weapons. She was largely ignored now, her initial novelty as a captive having worn off. Sarah's golden hair, once her pride, hung in dirty tangles down her back. Her blue calico dress, torn and stained, barely protected her fair skin from the relentless sun. At 22, she had left Boston full of hope, traveling west to teach at a frontier school. Now she existed in this strange limbo, neither fully prisoner nor remotely free. "You, come." The harsh command came from Nijoni, one of the older women who seemed to be in charge of Sarah. The woman's weathered face revealed nothing as she pointed to a small dwelling on the edge of camp. Sarah rose unsteadily, her legs weak from rationed food and limited movement. She followed Nijoni through the camp, feeling the usual stares, some curious, others hostile. She had learned to keep her eyes down, to appear submissive. It was safer that way. They approached a hide-covered wickiup set apart from the others. Sarah immediately noticed 2 warriors standing guard, unusual for the camp dwellings. Something important was happening here. "Inside," Nijoni commanded, holding back the entrance flap. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took several moments for Sarah's eyes to adjust. As her vision cleared, she saw a young man, perhaps 18 or 19, lying on a bed of furs. His bronze chest was bare except for a blood-soaked bandage wrapped around his midsection. His breathing was shallow, his face contorted in pain. An older man sat beside him, tall, distinguished even in his worry. His face was deeply lined, his hair streaked with gray, and he wore an elaborate headband that marked him as important. He looked up as they entered, his dark eyes piercing through Sarah. "Chief Nakohe," Nijoni said respectfully, inclining her head. "The white woman as you requested." Sarah froze. This was the chief, the man responsible for the raid that had killed her fellow travelers. Fear coiled in her stomach as she wondered why she had been summoned. The chief studied her silently before speaking in his native tongue to Nijoni. The woman translated in broken English. "Chief's son Takota wounded. White soldiers' bullets. 3 days, fever grows. Medicine not working." Sarah looked at the young man again. The chief's son, the heir to the tribe. He was clearly dying, the wound likely infected. "Why am I here?" Sarah whispered. Nijoni's face hardened. "Chief knows white people have medicine. You help or you die." The ultimatum hung in the air. Sarah moved closer, kneeling beside the young man. "I'm not a doctor," she said, her voice trembling. "I only know basic remedies my grandmother taught me." The chief spoke again, his voice deep and commanding even in its softness. "He says try or join others from wagon," Nijoni translated bluntly. Sarah nodded, understanding completely. "I need clean water, fresh bandages, and whiskey if you have it." Her mind raced through her grandmother's teachings about wound care. "And I need certain plants? I don't know what they're called here." For the next hour, Sarah described the plants she needed, and Nijoni brought various herbs until Sarah found what looked similar to what her grandmother had used for infections: echinacea and yarrow. She worked meticulously, cleaning the wound, which was angry and festering, preparing a poultice and forcing a herbal tea between the young man's lips. Chief Nakohe watched her every move, his face impassive but his eyes missing nothing. When she finally sat back, exhausted, she met his gaze. "I've done what I can," she said quietly. "The rest is up to him and your gods." The chief nodded once, then spoke to Nijoni, who translated, "You stay here, watch him. He dies, you die." As they left, Sarah sank down beside the wounded warrior, her hands shaking with the enormity of her situation. Her life now depended on saving someone she should, by all rights, consider her enemy. "Please live," she whispered to the unconscious young man, "for both our sakes." Outside the wickiup, the desert day was fading into dusk, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Sarah wondered if anyone was looking for her, if anyone even knew she was alive. The stagecoach company would have reported the attack, but would they assume all passengers dead? Throughout the night she tended to Dakota, replacing the poultice when needed, wiping his brow when the fever raged, and speaking softly to him though she knew he couldn't understand her words. "I had a brother once," she told him in the darkest hour of night. "He would have been about your age now. Influenza took him 3 winters ago." She dipped the cloth in cool water and placed it on his forehead. "I couldn't save him either." Dawn broke over the Apache camp, its pale light filtering through the seams of the wickiup. Sarah startled awake, realizing she'd fallen asleep against the dwelling's wall. She immediately looked to Dakota, fearing the worst, but saw with surprise that his breathing seemed steadier. She placed her hand on his forehead. The fever had lessened. "You're fighting," she whispered with a small smile. The entrance flap suddenly opened, and Chief Nakohe entered. His imposing figure blocked the morning light as he stood silently observing his son. Then his gaze shifted to Sarah, who quickly lowered her eyes. "He lives," the chief stated rather than asked, his English halting but understandable. Sarah nodded. "The fever has broken, but he needs more time to heal." Nakohe approached and knelt beside his son, placing a weathered hand on Dakota's chest, feeling the stronger heartbeat. Without looking at Sarah, he said, "You stay, continue." After he left, Nijoni brought Sarah a small wooden bowl of corn porridge and some dried meat. "You eat," she commanded, but her tone held less harshness than before. The day passed with Sarah changing bandages and preparing more medicine. By mid-afternoon, Dakota's eyes fluttered open for the first time. He stared at Sarah in confusion, then tried to sit up, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Shh," Sarah soothed, pressing gently on his shoulders. "You're safe. I'm helping you heal." His dark eyes, so like his father's, regarded her with suspicion. He spoke rapidly in Apache, his voice weak but demanding. "I don't understand," Sarah said softly, "but you need to rest." A shadow appeared at the entrance, and Nijoni entered. Dakota immediately addressed her, gesturing toward Sarah. Nijoni answered him, then turned to Sarah. "He asks who you are and why White Woman helps him." Sarah hesitated. Tell him I'm a prisoner, like him. Only his prison is his wounded body, and mine is this camp." After Nijoni translated, Dakota studied Sarah thoughtfully before speaking again. "He says you not like other white people they fight," Nijoni relayed. "He asks why you save enemy." The question struck Sarah deeply. Why was she helping him? Self-preservation, yes, but there was something more. Something about the senseless cycle of violence that had claimed so many lives already. "Tell him I don't see enemies when I look at him. I see a young man who deserves to live, just as my brother did." Her voice caught. "Tell him I couldn't save my brother, but perhaps I can save him." Days turned into a week as Dakota slowly regained his strength. Sarah continued to tend to him, and gradually, a strange kind of communication developed between them. He began teaching her Apache words and she taught him English ones. Their exchanges were simple but meaningful. "Sky," she would say, pointing upward. "Yeah," he would reply, then point to the ground. "Earth." "Earth," she would repeat, then touch the wall of the wickiup. "Home." "Gao," he would answer, then gesture to the camp beyond. "Home." One afternoon, as Sarah was helping Dakota sit up to drink some broth, Chief Nakohe entered unexpectedly. He stopped abruptly at the sight before him, the white captive supporting his son, their heads close together as they spoke softly. Sarah immediately withdrew her hands, fear returning. She had grown somewhat comfortable with Dakota, but the chief still terrified her. Nakohe spoke sharply to his son, who responded with equal intensity despite his weakened state. The exchange grew heated, with Dakota gesturing toward Sarah several times. Finally, the chief turned to her. "You teach my son white words?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Just a few. He was teaching me Apache words, too." Nakohe's expression darkened. "Why?" To pass the time during his healing." she answered truthfully. And because understanding each other seems better than not. The chief stared at her for a long moment. My son says you have kind heart. Says you are different. He moved closer, his presence intimidating. I have seen many white faces. All look same to me. All want our land, kill our people. Not all of us, Sarah said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. Just as I'm sure not all Apache are the same. Nako's eyes narrowed. Bold words from prisoner. Father, Dakota spoke in careful English. She saves me, shows, respect. The chief looked between them, then abruptly left the wiki up. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He angry, Dakota said simply. Yes, Sarah agreed, her hands trembling slightly. But he loves you. I can see that. Dakota nodded. My father. Good chief. Hard chief. He struggled to find the words. Many seasons fighting white soldiers. Much death. Much pain. I understand, Sarah said, though in truth she was only beginning to. The newspapers back east painted the Apache as savages, obstacles to progress. Now she was glimpsing the other side of the story, a people defending their way of life, their homeland. That evening, as the camp settled into nighttime routines, Sarah sat outside the wiki up for the first time since she'd been assigned to care for Dakota. The chief had not returned, and Dakota was sleeping peacefully. The night air was cool against her skin, a welcome relief after the confined space of the dwelling. From her position, she could see much of the camp, women preparing the evening meal, children playing games, warriors gathered in small groups. It struck her how ordinary it all seemed, how human. These were not the mindless savages of dime novels, but people with families, traditions, and lives. You sit alone. The voice startled her. A young woman about her age stood nearby, watching her curiously. Yes, Sarah stammered, surprised by the clear English. The woman sat beside her. I am Istas. I learn English from missionary before he die. I'm Sarah. Istas nodded. I know, the one who heals Dakota. She studied Sarah openly. Why you do this? He is son of man who take you. Sarah considered the question. At first, because I had to, but now, I don't know. It seemed right. Right, Istas repeated, testing the word. My father says white people only know right for themselves. Your father? Chief Nakohe, Istas replied. Dakota, my brother. Sarah's eyes widened. You're the chief's daughter? Istas nodded. Father sent me, says I watch you, learn your heart. She pointed to her chest. See if lies live here. And what do you think? Sarah asked quietly. Istas tilted her head, considering. I think maybe you different, like Dakota says. She stood abruptly. But maybe not. Time will show truth. As Istas walked away, Sarah felt the weight of being judged not just as herself, but as a representative of all white people. She wondered what Istas had seen and what she would report to her father. Inside the wickiup, Dakota stirred and called out softly. Sarah returned to his side, helping him drink some water. Your sister came to see me, she said. Dakota smiled slightly. Istas good, strong like mountain. She speaks English very well. She learned many things. Father let her go to missionary place before. He trailed off, his face darkening. Before what? Dakota met her gaze directly. Before white soldiers burn it. Kill missionary who teach us peace. A cool morning breeze swept through the camp as Sarah helped Dakota take his first steps outside the wickiup. 2 weeks had passed since she began caring for him, and his recovery, while not complete, was remarkable. He leaned on her slightly, his tall frame making her feel small despite his weakened state. Good, he said, breathing deeply of the fresh air. Too long inside. The camp's activity slowed as people noticed them. Children stopped playing, women paused in their work, and warriors straightened, watching intently as the chief's son walked with the white captive. Sarah felt exposed under their collective gaze. Perhaps we should go back, she whispered. No, Dakota replied firmly. My people see I am strong again. He paused, then added, and see who made me strong. They moved slowly toward a flat rock where they could sit in the sun. As they settled, Sarah noticed a group of warriors approaching, led by a tall, muscular man whose face was set in a scowl. Neshoba. Dakota said quietly. My cousin, not friend to you. Neshoba stopped before them, ignoring Sarah completely as he addressed Dakota in rapid Apache. Though she couldn't understand the words, his tone was clearly confrontational. Dakota responded calmly but firmly, occasionally gesturing toward Sarah. The exchange grew more heated, until Neshoba suddenly switched to broken English, clearly wanting Sarah to understand his words. She enemy, he spat. Her people kill Apache children, steal Apache land. You let her touch you, teach you white words, you become weak like them. Dakota's jaw tightened. She saved my life. You call this weakness? Our ways teach honor for life debt. No honor with white eyes, Neshoba retorted. Chief too soft now. Old ways say she die with others from wagon. Sarah remained silent, her heart pounding. She had known her position was precarious, but hearing the open hostility reminded her how tenuous her safety truly was. Enough, came a commanding voice. Chief Nakohe approached, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. Neshoba stepped back respectfully but continued to glare at Sarah. The chief spoke to his son, who nodded and replied. Then Nakohe turned to Sarah. You make my son walk again. This good. His eyes narrowed. But Neshoba speaks truth also. Your people bring death to Apache. Why should one white life matter? The question hung in the air. Sarah knew her answer could determine her fate. I cannot speak for all my people, she said carefully. Just as Neshoba does not speak for all Apache. I can only show through my actions who I am. The chief regarded her thoughtfully. Bold words again. He looked at his son. Dakota says you teach respect for Apache ways. Is this true? Sarah nodded. He's taught me much about your people, things I never knew. And you learn willingly. Why? Because understanding is better than ignorance, she replied. In Boston, we hear only of savage raids and scalping. We don't hear of families protecting their homeland or traditions worth preserving. A murmur ran through the growing crowd around them. Nakohe's expression remained unreadable. You speak well for someone afraid. I am afraid, Sarah admitted. But I also see that there is more here than I was taught to believe. The chief was silent for a long moment before speaking to the assembled tribe in Apache. The crowd gradually dispersed, including a reluctant Neshoba, who cast one final threatening look at Sarah. Nakohe turned back to them. Tonight, council meets. We speak of you. With that, he walked away, leaving Sarah and Dakota alone. What will happen at the council? Sarah asked quietly. Dakota's expression was grave. They decide your fate. If you stay, go, or die. The remainder of the day passed in tense anticipation. Sarah helped Dakota back to his wickiup, where they sat in silence for some time. Finally, Dakota spoke. You save me. Now, I try save you. Sarah looked up at him. How? I speak to council, tell them you good heart. He hesitated. But Neshoba have many friends. Young warriors who want war, not peace. And what does your father want? Dakota's gaze was thoughtful. Father. Tired of death. Tired of losing people. But he is chief first. Must do what is best for tribe. As dusk approached, Istus entered the wickiup carrying a small bundle. Father says you come to council, she told Sarah. Wear this. Inside the bundle was a simple deerskin dress, soft and well-made. Sarah looked at it in surprise. Apache clothes, Istus explained. Not good to face council in torn white clothes. Sarah changed behind a hide screen, emerging in the deerskin dress. It fit well enough, though it was slightly large for her frame. Better, Istus nodded. Now hair. She proceeded to brush Sarah's tangled blonde hair with a crude comb, then braided it simply. Now, you look less foreign. Sarah touched the braid. Thank you. Istus's expression softened slightly. Dakota say you have good heart. I hope council sees this. She took Sarah's arm. Come now, time. The council was held in a large circular structure at the center of camp. Fires burned brightly inside, illuminating the faces of perhaps 20 men seated in a semicircle. Chief Nakohe sat in the center on an elevated platform, flanked by the oldest members of the tribe. Dakota was there too, sitting slightly behind his father. Sarah was led to stand alone in the center, facing the chief. The murmurs ceased as all eyes turned to her. Nakohe began speaking in Apache, his deep voice filling the space. Others spoke in turn, some gesturing angrily toward Sarah, others more measured in their delivery. Nashoba spoke the longest, his words causing several warriors to nod in agreement. Finally, Takoda rose, still moving carefully due to his wound. His speech was passionate, and though Sarah couldn't understand the words, she could feel their impact. At one point, he pulled aside his shirt to show his healing wound, then pointed directly at Sarah. When the speeches concluded, Nakohe stood and addressed Sarah directly in English. "You have heard our words, though not understood them. Now you speak. Why should Apache let you live? Why not return you to your people? Why not take your life as white soldiers take ours?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I cannot undo what others of my kind have done. I cannot bring back those you've lost." She looked around the circle, meeting eyes that regarded her with everything from curiosity to hatred. "All I can say is that in caring for Takoda, I've learned that what divides us is less important than what makes us the same. We all want to protect those we love. We all bleed the same." She hesitated, then continued with growing conviction. "I was taught that Apache were savages who understood only violence. Now I see that was a lie told to make taking your land seem right. If I return to my people with this knowledge, perhaps I can help others see the truth." The council chamber was silent when she finished. Nakohe studied her for a long moment before speaking to the council once more. The discussion continued for what seemed like hours, with Sarah standing alone in the center, exhaustion and fear battling within her. Finally, Nakohe raised his hand for silence. "Council has decided," he announced, turning to Sarah. "You have saved life of Chief's son. This creates life debt." His expression remained stern. "You will stay with Apache as Takoda heals fully. Learn our ways, then Council decide again." Sarah felt relief wash over her. It wasn't freedom, but it wasn't death either. "Thank you," she said, bowing her head respectfully. As the council dispersed, Istas approached and led her outside. "You speak well," she said. Father impressed, though he not show it. "And you?" Sarah asked. "What do you think of the council's decision?" Istas considered the question. "I think, good chance for you, good chance for Apache, too." She looked directly at Sarah. "Maybe you bridge between worlds." That night, Sarah was moved from her previous small shelter to a wiki up near the chief's family dwellings. Still a prisoner, but with a markedly improved status. As she settled onto her new sleeping mat, she heard a soft voice outside. "Sarah?" She recognized Takoda's voice and moved to the entrance. He stood there in the moonlight, leaning slightly on a walking stick. "You should be resting," she admonished gently. He smiled slightly. "I bring this." He handed her a small leather pouch. Inside was a delicately carved wooden pendant on a leather cord. The pendant was shaped like an eagle in flight. "Eagle medicine," Takoda explained. "For protection, for courage." He struggled with the word. Sarah was touched by the gesture. "It's beautiful. Thank you." "Tomorrow," he said, "I show you more Apache ways, you show me more English words." He paused. "Father watches. Sees if you learn true or just pretend." Sarah understood the implied warning. Her continued safety depended on genuine engagement with Apache culture. "I want to learn," she assured him. "Truly." Takoda nodded. "I believe." He turned to go, then added, "Rest now. Tomorrow long day." As he walked away, Sarah clutched the eagle pendant. She wasn't free, but somehow against all odds, she had found something unexpected in this place of captivity, understanding, and perhaps, if she was very fortunate, the beginning of respect. The Arizona autumn painted the landscape in muted golds and browns as Sarah sat beside a small stream, carefully grinding herbs with a stone mortar and pestle. 3 months had passed since the council's decision, and much had changed. Her hands, once soft from city living, now bore the calluses of daily tribal work. Her skin had darkened under the desert sun, and she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her place. "Your medicine worked good," came Istas's voice as she approached with a basket of freshly picked berries. Over the weeks, the chief's daughter had gradually shifted from wary observer to something resembling a friend. "My grandmother would be surprised," Sarah replied with a small smile. "She always said I was too impatient for healing work." Istas settled beside her. Today, riders come from Fort McDowell. White soldiers want talk with father. Sarah's hands stilled. Soldiers? Here? Peace talk, Istas explained, though her expression remained skeptical. They send papers saying they want make treaty. Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions. These would be the first white people she'd seen since her capture. Once, she would have viewed their arrival as rescue. Now, she wasn't so sure. Will your father meet with them? Istas nodded. He agrees, says too many Apache die fighting. She studied Sarah closely. You go back to your people now? The question hung between them. Sarah had pondered this possibility often in recent weeks. Her status had evolved from prisoner to something undefined, not quite free, but no longer treated as captive either. She had learned to prepare traditional foods, to weave baskets, to identify healing plants. Dakota, now fully recovered, had taught her the basics of their language, while she had expanded his English considerably. I don't know, Sarah answered honestly. I'm not sure where I belong anymore. Istas's expression softened with understanding. Two-world person, not easy. Later that morning, the camp buzzed with preparation for the soldiers' arrival. Warriors painted their faces not for battle, but for formal council, while the chief and elders donned their finest ceremonial attire. Sarah remained in the background, helping where needed, but careful not to draw attention. Dakota found her organizing medicinal herbs outside her wiki-up. Father says you come to meeting, he said without preamble. Sarah looked up in surprise. Me? Why? Soldiers bring interpreter. Father wants you hear both languages, tell if words same. His dark eyes held hers. He trusts your truth now. The realization of what this meant, that the chief valued her enough to include her in such an important meeting, left Sarah momentarily speechless. I'll do my best, she finally managed. Dakota nodded, then hesitated. These soldiers, your people, you feel pulled to them. The question touched on Sarah's deepest uncertainty. They're white like me, she acknowledged. But that doesn't make them mine. Not anymore. Something like relief flickered across Dakota's face. Come, he said, extending his hand to help her up. They arrive soon. The meeting was to be held on neutral ground, a flat area halfway between the camp and the soldiers' temporary position. Sarah walked with the Apache delegation, aware of the symbolic significance of her placement, not at the front with the chief and his son, but not at the rear either, somewhere in between, like her identity itself. The soldiers came into view, 10 men on horseback, led by a captain whose uniform bore the insignia of long service. His weathered face registered clear surprise at the sight of Sarah among the Apache. As the two groups faced each other, the formal greetings began. The military interpreter, a half-Mexican, half-Yavapai man named Miguel, translated the captain's words into Apache, while Nakkohe's responses were converted to English. Sarah listened intently, noting with growing concern the discrepancies between what was said and what was translated. The captain spoke of peaceful relocation to a reservation where the Apache would be provided for, but Miguel rendered this as temporary hunting grounds with government supplies. When Nakkohe asked about boundaries and autonomy, the interpreter softened the captain's firm refusal into a vague promise of consideration. Sarah caught Dakota's eye, giving a small shake of her head to indicate the dishonesty. He nodded almost imperceptibly, then whispered something to his father. The chief raised his hand, interrupting the proceedings. My son says white woman understands both tongues, he stated in his limited English, looking directly at the captain. She will speak true words. The captain's attention shifted fully to Sarah for the first time. Ma'am, you're American? Are you being held here against your will? The directness of his question caught Sarah off guard. 3 months ago, her answer would have been an unequivocal yes. Now, I was captured during a stagecoach raid, she said carefully, but I've since been treated with respect. She straightened her shoulders. And yes, I understand enough Apache to know your interpreter isn't translating honestly. The captain's expression hardened. Miss, if you're being coerced, I'm not, Sarah interrupted firmly. Chief Nakkohe has granted me the freedom to speak truthfully, and that's what I'm doing. Your interpreter is misleading both sides. Miguel's face darkened with anger, but before he could protest, the captain silenced him with a gesture. Very well. Perhaps you should translate instead, Miss Matthews, Sarah Matthews. She turned to the chief for permission, receiving a nod of approval. For the next hour, Sarah mediated the discussion, carefully translating each side's words without embellishment or omission. The truth was difficult. The government wanted the Apache relocated far from their ancestral lands, with limited autonomy and dependency on government rations. The Apache wanted to maintain their territory and way of life. The gap seemed unbridgeable. As the meeting concluded with only a temporary truce established, the captain approached Sarah directly. Miss Matthews, there's a stagecoach leaving Fort McDowell for Tucson tomorrow. I'd be glad to escort you there. Sarah felt all eyes on her, the hopeful gaze of the soldiers who assumed she'd eagerly accept, and the more complex expressions of the Apache who had become her community. Thank you, Captain, but I need time to consider, she said, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. This isn't a simple matter for me anymore. The captain looked bewildered. Surely you can't mean to stay with... He cut himself off, glancing at the Apache warriors. Very well. We'll remain camped near the creek until noon tomorrow. You have until then to... consider. As they returned to camp, Dakota walked beside Sarah. You speak truth to both sides, he said quietly. Not easy path. No, she agreed, but it felt right. That evening, as the camp settled into its nighttime routine, Sarah sat outside her wickiup, watching the stars emerge in the vast desert sky. Her mind was a tumult of conflicting thoughts. Return to the white world, to safety, familiarity, and her original purpose, or stay with the people who had shifted from captors to something far more complex. Teachers, perhaps even friends. Your spirit troubles you, came Chief Nakohe's deep voice as he approached and sat nearby. It was rare for him to seek her out directly, and Sarah straightened respectfully. I have a difficult choice, she admitted. The chief nodded. 2 paths, 2 worlds. He gazed at the distant mountains. When I was young warrior, I hate all white eyes. See only enemies. He looked at her directly. Now I am older. See more clearly. Not all same. Sarah was surprised by his candor. What do you think I should do? Not my place to choose your path. He was silent for a moment before continuing. But I say this. Apache needs someone who walks between worlds, someone who speaks truth to both sides. The implication was clear, and it resonated with something that had been growing in Sarah's heart. And if I stayed, what would my place be? Teacher, he replied without hesitation. Teach our children English words, white ways. Help us understand white thinking. He paused. And teach white soldiers Apache truth. Be bridge where no bridge stands. Sarah considered his words. And Nashoba? Others who don't trust me? Time changes many hearts, the chief said simply. Yours changed. Theirs can too. After Nakohe left, Istas approached with a small wooden cup of herbal tea. You look like thinking hurts, she said with a hint of teasing as she offered the drink. Sarah accepted it gratefully. Your father suggested I might stay. As a teacher, Istas sat beside her. What does your heart say? That I've found purpose here I never expected. Sarah sipped the tea, its bittersweet taste now familiar and comforting. Back in Boston, I wanted to teach children on the frontier. Never imagined those children would be Apache. Many paths lead to same place, Istas observed. Creator has strange ways. Later, as Sarah prepared for sleep, a soft voice called from outside. Sarah? She recognized Dakota's voice and stepped outside. He stood in the moonlight, his tall frame outlined against the night sky. Walk with me, he asked. They strolled to the edge of camp, where the desert stretched vast and silver-touched under the moon. For several minutes they stood in companionable silence. Finally, Dakota spoke. I hear soldiers leave tomorrow. Yes. You go with them? His voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah could sense the importance of his question. I've been thinking about that all day, she replied honestly. When I came west, I wanted to make a difference, to teach children who needed knowledge. And now? Sarah turned to face him. Now I see that there's teaching needed here. Not just English, but understanding. Something to help bridge the distance between two peoples who see each other as enemies. Dakota's expression remained guarded. This hard path. Many on both sides not want bridge. The hardest paths are often the most important, Sarah said, echoing wisdom her grandmother had once shared. If you stay, Dakota said carefully, you stay as teacher or more. The question's deeper meaning wasn't lost on Sarah. Over the months, something had grown between them. A connection built first on necessity, then respect, and finally something deeper neither had named. I don't know yet, she answered truthfully, but I'd like the chance to find out. The smile that spread across Dakota's face was answer enough. He took her hand gently. Then we walked path together, find way between worlds. The following morning, Sarah approached the soldiers' camp alone, having insisted that this was a journey she needed to make by herself. Captain Reynolds greeted her with obvious relief. Miss Matthews, I'm glad to see you've come to your senses, he said, already gesturing to a soldier to prepare a horse for her. Actually, Captain, I've come to inform you that I won't be leaving with you, she replied steadily. I've accepted a position as teacher to the Apache children. With Chief Nakohe's blessing. The captain stared at her in disbelief. You can't be serious. These savages killed your fellow passengers, held you captive. They also showed me a side of their culture few white people ever see, Sarah interrupted. They've granted me a unique opportunity to help build understanding between our peoples. The Army won't protect you if you stay voluntarily, he warned. I'm aware of the risks, she replied, but I believe this is where I'm meant to be. After a few more attempts to dissuade her, the captain reluctantly accepted her decision. I'll report your choice to the authorities, he said stiffly, and I'll send word to the school board in Tucson that you've found alternate employment. Thank you. Sarah hesitated, then added, and Captain, when you report to your superiors about the Apache, please tell them there are possibilities for peace that don't require either side to completely surrender who they are. As she watched the soldiers ride away, Sarah felt a profound sense of certainty. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be distrust from both sides, dangers, and misunderstandings. But for the first time since the stagecoach attack, she felt truly purposeful. Returning to the camp, she found Dakota waiting at its edge. They gone? He asked. Yes. She stood beside him, looking at the place that had transformed from her prison to her home. I told the captain I'm staying as a teacher. Dakota smiled, taking her hand. And as bridge between worlds. And as that too, she agreed. Together they walked back into the camp where children played, women worked, and life continued. The daily rhythm of a people fighting to preserve their way of life in a changing world. Sarah knew that her choice had placed her at the center of that struggle, a position both precarious and precious. As they approached, Istaz came forward with a bundle in her arms. New clothing she had made for Sarah, decorated with traditional Apache patterns but sized for her smaller frame. For new path, Istaz said, presenting the gift. Chief Nakohe watched from the entrance of his wickiup, his weathered face showing the faintest hint of approval as Sarah accepted the clothing with proper Apache thanks. The journey from captive to teacher, from outsider to bridge builder, was just beginning. But as Sarah looked around at the faces that had become familiar, some now friendly, others still wary but respectful, she knew she had found her frontier, not the one she had imagined when leaving Boston, but one far more important. The frontier between two worlds that needed desperately to understand each other. Come, Dakota said, gesturing toward the center of camp where several children had gathered, watching her curiously. First lesson begins. Sarah smiled and followed, ready to build the first plank in a bridge that might, with time and care, span the divide between peoples.